The storm had passed, leaving Dust Haven cloaked in silence, shutters swaying on rusted hinges. Sheriff James McGraw scanned the street, jaw clenched, his weathered face tense. The saloon doors banged open, and Thomas Reed staggered in, his shirt torn, soaked in blood, eyes wild with terror. He gasped, "They're here," before collapsing on the floorboards. The townsfolk froze, whispers spreading like wildfire. James barked, "Speak plain, man who hunts you." Thomas coughed, voice cracking. "The riders, dead ones, they ride again." Fear cut through the room like a blade. Every soul knew the past had clawed its way back, and the frontier would not sleep tonight. The saloon air grew heavy. James McGraw knelt beside Thomas Reed, voice steady yet sharp. "Who are they?" Thomas's gaze snapped to the door, as if death itself stood waiting. He whispered, "Riders, shadows, their eyes burn." Mary Collins clutched her boy close, lips trembling in prayer. Samuel Holt grunted, "Nonsense." Yet the silence told a harsher truth. James rose slowly, voice deep. "Fear poisons, but truth cuts deeper." The lanterns flickered, shadows trembling as if the walls themselves recoiled from what had been spoken. Every soul felt the storm had not passed at all. James McGraw dragged Thomas Reed upright, his grip firm, eyes searching the man's pale, trembling face. "Look at me," James demanded, voice slicing the silence. Thomas stammered, "I saw them rise from the storm. Horses made no sound." Samuel Holt sneered, "Drunk fool." James' eyes burned darker. "I've seen liars. Fear leaves scars." Thunder rolled outside, rattling glass, faint but ominous. Whispers crawled across the saloon. James studied Thomas, and knew terror was carved deeper than lies. Legends long buried stirred like restless graves. Elias Boone stepped forward, cane tapping each step, his silver beard catching lantern glow. His eyes carried storms of memory. "It's no tale," Elias said, gravel voice trembling. "The riders are cursed souls bound to vengeance." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Thomas Reed nodded weakly, eyes pleading. James McGraw's brow furrowed. "You knew?" Elias shook his head. "The past never stays buried, Sheriff. Tonight it rides." The lantern flames wavered as if the truth itself unsettled the air. The saloon door creaked again, and Mayor Victor Cartwright entered, polished waistcoat gleaming, his eyes sharp with false charm. He tipped his hat with a smirk. "Ghost stories again?" he mocked. James McGraw's jaw locked. Elias Boone spat, "You mock what you fear not." Cartwright's smile widened. "Fear fattens weak men. My town bows to no shadows." Thomas Reed groaned. "They come for blood." Cartwright's gaze turned cold, dismissing him with contempt. Thunder cracked closer, rattling glass, shaking Dust Haven with warnings only the brave dared hear. The night settled heavy across Dust Haven, the air sharp with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Far beyond the town's edge, faint hoofbeats stirred like a drumbeat of doom. On a lonely ranch, lantern light flickered in the windows as Sarah Donovan tended her hearth. Suddenly, the silence shattered with an unholy chorus of neighs that carried no life. Riders swept from the mist, their forms shrouded in shadow, faces hidden behind bone-white masks. Their horses kicked up no dust. Flames erupted as the barn ignited in a blaze. Sarah screamed, clutching her daughter, while the night echoed with gunfire that did nothing to halt the phantom charge. At dawn, James McGraw rode hard across the plain, dust trailing his boots as he approached the smoldering ruins. The ranch lay in ashes, black smoke clawing the pale sky. He dismounted, scanning broken fences and charred wood. Bodies lay silent, twisted in death. James' jaw tightened, his hand brushing the grip of his revolver. Thomas Reed, still weak, murmured from the saddle, "You see, no man breathes after they pass." James crouched, pressing his palm to scorched earth, the ash clinging to his skin. He muttered, "This was no storm. This was slaughter." The truth gnawed at him, heavier than any legend whispered in town. Beside the ruins, Daniel Harper, the loyal sidekick, rode up, dust caked across his young face. He dismounted with hurried steps, eyes burning with resolve. "You'll not face this alone," Daniel said firmly, gripping James McGraw's shoulder. James shook his head, voice low. "This isn't a fight for boys chasing glory." Daniel snapped. "Glory's nothing. I ride because fear won't chain me." James studied him, seeing fire that would not bend, but beneath it, innocence teetering on the edge of ruin. In Daniel's eyes, he saw both loyalty and a fate he wished he could shield him from. Back in Dust Haven, Mary Collins pleaded with James McGraw in the quiet of her modest home. She stood firm, her child clinging to her side, voice trembling yet strong. "You've seen what they are," she said. "This fight is no man's burden alone." James removed his hat, eyes heavy with doubt. "I can't ask anyone to walk into hell." Mary's jaw set. "Hell's already here." Her words cut deeper than any blade. The boy tugged at her skirt, wide-eyed. For a moment, James felt the weight of every life pressing on his shoulders, heavier than his revolver could ever be. The townsfolk gathered outside the church, voices sharp with fear, faces pale as the night's tale spread. Victor Cartwright stood atop the steps, his waistcoat gleaming, hands raised in feigned calm. "You tremble at whispers," he said smoothly. "No phantom can harm what flesh resists." James McGraw strode forward, eyes locked on Cartwright. "They are no whispers, Mayor. I saw the ruin." Cartwright's smirk lingered. "Fear weakens. My word is law." Gasps rippled through the crowd as Elias Boone's cane struck the ground. "Law won't stop the dead," Elias growled. The church bell groaned in the wind, echoing like a funeral toll. The sun dipped low, painting the plains in crimson as James McGraw rode with Daniel Harper and Thomas Reed at his side. The air carried the smell of scorched wood and sweat. Daniel broke the silence. "If they rise again, we'll meet them head on." James said nothing, his eyes fixed on the horizon where heat waves blurred the endless stretch. Thomas trembled, voice weak. "You don't understand. They come when the world grows quiet." James pulled his revolver from its holster, checking the cylinder. His voice was flat. "Then quiet's the enemy." The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint, metallic echo of hooves. From the haze, the riders came like phantoms, their skeletal masks gleaming in dying light. Their horses thundered soundlessly across the earth. Daniel Harper shouted, "James, they're here!" James spurred his horse forward, revolver raised. The riders split into two lines, circling with eerie precision. Thomas Reed clutched his side, panic rising. Gunfire cracked, bullets tearing through the air, but the riders did not falter. Lantern light spilled from a nearby ridge cabin, its glow trembling against the charge. James gritted his teeth, "Hold steady." The sky seemed to shiver as the ghostly horde closed in, surrounding them like a noose tightening. The first clash erupted in fire and steel. James McGraw fired into the mass, but bullets passed through shadows that twisted like smoke. Daniel Harper swung down, pulling Thomas Reed behind cover. A rider lunged, skeletal mask glowing faint with ember light. James struck with his revolver's butt, smashing bone into ash that scattered into the wind. Yet, for every one that fell, two more emerged from the mist. Thomas cried out, "You can't kill what's already dead." James snarled, "Then I'll break them apart till nothing's left." The ground trembled beneath hooves that seemed to belong to no living beast. When the last echo of hooves faded, James McGraw stood gasping, dust clinging to his coat. Daniel Harper leaned against a rock, face streaked with sweat, eyes burning with disbelief. "We barely lived through that," Daniel said, voice shaking. Thomas Reed collapsed, clutching his chest, murmuring curses through clenched teeth. Elias Boone arrived on horseback, cane strapped across his saddle, eyes grim. "I warned you," Elias said. James turned, anger cutting his words. "You knew more than you told." Elias nodded, sorrow heavy in his voice. "These riders are not born of storm. Their vengeance made flesh, chained to this land." Victor Cartwright arrived with a small escort, his polished boots sinking into dust as he surveyed the wreckage. He smiled thinly, voice dripping disdain. "So this is the terror that has my town trembling." James McGraw stepped forward, his body still trembling from the fight. "These are no myths, Cartwright. They bleed nothing, yet they kill." Cartwright adjusted his waistcoat, smirk never leaving his lips. "Fear makes men fools. You'll waste your strength chasing shadows while I keep order." Elias Boone's voice thundered, "Your order feeds their curse." The crowd murmured, torn between the sheriff's scars and the mayor's lies. In the quiet of the church hall, Mary Collins held a bundle of papers, her hands trembling as she handed them to James McGraw. Her voice cracked but steady. "These deeds prove what Cartwright stole. Land burned, families broken. It began with him." James scanned the brittle pages, the ink faded but sharp with truth. Daniel Harper leaned forward. "The ghostwriters, they're tied to this theft." Mary's eyes brimmed with anger. Cartwright's greed left them to rot in shallow graves. James lowered the papers, his jaw set hard. "Then this isn't just vengeance," he said. "It's justice clawing from the earth." Outside, Victor Cartwright rallied townsfolk with smooth words, standing tall on the steps of his office. "McGraw fills your ears with superstition," he said, voice calm but cold. "He would see us divided, when unity is survival." Whispers rose among the crowd. James McGraw stepped forward, his revolver holstered but his eyes burning. "I've seen the dead ride and I've seen your lies written in ash." Cartwright's lips curled into a sneer. "And yet, they follow me, not you." The people shifted uneasily, caught between power and truth. The weight of silence pressed like a storm waiting to break. As the tension mounted, a sudden gunshot cracked the air. Daniel Harper staggered back, clutching his side, crimson blooming against his shirt. The townsfolk screamed as chaos broke out. James McGraw caught Daniel before he fell, his voice fierce, "Stay with me." Daniel gritted his teeth, whispering, "I'm not done yet." From the shadows, hired gunmen loyal to Cartwright slipped into view, rifles raised. Elias Boone slammed his cane into the ground, shouting, "Cowards hide behind bullets." James' fury burned hotter than fear as he drew his revolver. The town itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for blood to spill. In the saloon's back room, Elias Boone revealed the truth, his voice low but steady. Years ago, Cartwright led men to slaughter settlers for their land. Those who died never rested. Their rage bound them to the plains. James McGraw's fists tightened. Mary Collins whispered, "The riders? They're the victims." Thomas Reed shook his head violently. "No, they're demons now." Elias leaned forward, his eyes grim. "Demons maybe, but forged by Cartwright's greed." Silence pressed in, heavy, broken only by Daniel Harper's ragged breaths. James stood, eyes shadowed. "Then to end this, we must cut Cartwright's rot from the root." Beneath the weight of betrayal, the town turned against itself. A trusted shopkeeper stepped forward, shouting, "Cartwright promised us safety," and struck James McGraw across the face. Gasps rippled through the crowd as fists rose and sides split. Elias Boone raised his cane, shouting for calm, but voices drowned him. Mary Collins tried to shield her boy, pushing through the mob. Daniel Harper struggled to his feet, pain bending him, but determination unbroken. James wiped blood from his lip, staring at Cartwright, who smiled with triumph. The sheriff's voice cut through the storm, low and sharp. "You've poisoned them all." Dust heaven trembled under firelight as the ghost riders swept through, their silhouettes burning against the night. Buildings cracked with flames, screams filled the air, and the church bell tolled without a hand pulling it. James McGraw charged into the chaos, revolver blazing, shouting for people to flee. Daniel Harper stumbled from the saloon, blood seeping through his bandage, determined to fight though every step dragged. Mary Collins shielded her child as sparks rained from collapsing roofs. Victor Cartwright watched from the shadows, a smirk curling his lips as his town burned, his silence louder than the firestorm around him. The square became a killing ground. Rioters burst through smoke, their skeletal masks glowing faintly in the blaze. Daniel Harper raised his pistol, firing wildly until his knees buckled. James McGraw caught him, dragging him toward cover. Daniel's voice rasped, "Leave me, Sheriff. Save the others." James gritted his teeth. "Not while you breathe." A rider slashed past, spectral blade grazing Daniel's shoulder, sending sparks of pain through him. Mary Collins cried out from across the street, her child clutched tight. The air reeked of ash, blood, and fear. Daniel's face turned pale, his strength slipping like water through his hands. Inside the rubble of a collapsed store, James McGraw knelt by Daniel Harper, pressing cloth against his wound. Daniel coughed, eyes glassy, whispering, "I wanted to be strong enough, like you." James shook his head, voice heavy with grief. "You were stronger than me, Daniel. You gave them hope." The young man's hand gripped James' wrist before falling limp, his chest stilling in the flickering light. James bowed his head, his breath breaking. Outside, the riders screamed through the night, the sound like 1,000 broken voices. James rose slowly, pain carved deep into his face, firelight reflecting in his eyes. Mary Collins knelt at James McGraw's side, her child pressed close, eyes full of sorrow. "You can't carry this alone," she whispered. James looked away, his voice cracked. "I carry their blood whether I want to or not." Elias Boone entered through the wreckage, cane tapping against the broken floor. His voice was steady but grim. "Then carry it forward. My time is near its end, but yours still burns." James' eyes locked with his, seeing the weight of years etched deep. Elias placed a trembling hand on his shoulder, passing strength with his final words. "Don't falter, Sheriff." The night ended with silence heavier than the flames had been. Elias Boone lay still in the ashes, his eyes closed, his hands slipping from James McGraw's grasp. "God." The sheriff knelt there, chest hollow, rage and grief tangled as one. Mary Collins whispered prayers, her child holding her tightly, both faces streaked with soot. Victor Cartwright stood on the edge of the ruin, his polished boots unscathed by fire, his expression untouched by grief. James rose, ashes clinging to his coat, voice low but fierce, "This isn't over." In that moment, Dust Heaven stood broken, but vengeance burned brighter than ever. In the charred silence of Dust Haven, James McGraw pored over the documents Mary Collins had saved, his hands trembling with the weight of truth. Elias Boone's dying words echoed in his ears. "Cartwright bound them to this land," James muttered. The papers revealed names, dates, and stolen deeds, all tied to Victor Cartwright's rise. Daniel Harper's blood still stained James' coat, and grief hardened into fury. Mary whispered, "They're not monsters, James. They're the victims." Thomas Reed shook his head violently. "No, victims don't kill like this." James' eyes darkened. Victims become vengeance when justice is denied. Mary Collins revealed a sealed letter hidden among the deeds, her voice breaking. "This is Cartwright's confession," he ordered the massacre. James McGraw's jaw locked, the words searing deeper than bullets. "He damned them with greed," James growled. Thomas Reed staggered back, whispering, "Then the riders hunt his blood, not ours." Mary gripped James' arm, fire in her eyes. "The town must hear the truth." James shook his head, voice raw. "Cartwright owns their fear. We need more than words." Outside, the wind howled like restless spirits circling Dust Haven, demanding retribution long denied. The townsfolk gathered uneasily near the church ruins, drawn by whispers of Cartwright's lies. James McGraw stood before them, holding the stained papers high. "This is his truth," he shouted. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, fear and anger colliding. Victor Cartwright emerged, flanked by his guards, his voice smooth as silk. Forged lies, spoken by a desperate man. Mary Collins cried out, "He slaughtered families, buried them shallow, and cursed us all." The crowd shifted, torn between belief and denial. The sky darkened as if echoing their doubt, while the riders' distant cries carried across the wind like thunder. Victor Cartwright struck back with venom, pointing at James McGraw. "This man brings ruin. He drags corpses from the dirt to rule you by fear." His words slithered like poison into ears eager for denial. The guards raised their rifles, forming a wall between Cartwright and the restless crowd. James stepped forward, revolver at his hip, voice iron. "You damned this land with your greed. Now the dead ride for you." Cartwright sneered. "Then let them come. Dust Heaven belongs to me." The crowd gasped as a spectral wind swept through, rattling windows, and the church bell tolled without touch. That night, James McGraw prepared for the final reckoning. He stood alone by the edge of the plains, lantern light casting fire across his face. He tightened his revolver belt, checked each round with ritual care, and whispered to the night, "This ends with me." Mary Collins approached, her child clinging to her side. "If you fall, we all fall," she said, voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. James nodded once, no words left. Behind them, Thomas Reed lingered, haunted but unwilling to run. In the distance, the faint glow of ghostly torches began to rise like stars of death. The plains erupted with ghostly thunder as the riders emerged, their skeletal masks glowing like embers, torches burning blue against the night. James McGraw stood tall, revolver drawn, his silhouette carved in firelight. The air trembled with their charge, hooves shaking the earth, though no sound should come. Mary Collins shielded her child, whispering prayers, while Thomas Reed backed away, torn between terror and duty. James roared, "This ends tonight." His voice cut through the shrieks as the horde descended. Dust Heaven's fate hung in the roar of phantom hooves, every soul bracing for the storm of the dead. James McGraw met Victor Cartwright at the heart of the chaos. Flames licked the sky as the two men faced each other, one driven by greed, the other by justice. Cartwright sneered, "You'll die with them, Sheriff." James raised his revolver, eyes hard as steel. "Better with them than beside you." Gunfire cracked, sparks flying as bullets tore wood and stone. Cartwright drew with deadly speed, his shots precise, but James pressed forward. Around them, ghost riders swept through, ignoring both men, bound only by vengeance. The duel lit the night, two fates clashing as the dead howled around them. James McGraw fought with fury, but Victor Cartwright's shots grazed his coat and sent sparks from the stones. Mary Collins cried out as she shielded her child from the stray bullets. Thomas Reed, trembling, picked up a fallen rifle, shouting, "It's his blood they want." He fired toward Cartwright, the blast catching his arm. Cartwright staggered, cursing, his polished mask of control cracking. The ghost riders turned, their heads jerking as if scenting prey. James roared, "You bound them, Cartwright. Now face them." The riders advanced, flames flickering in their hollow eyes, their vengeance aimed at the man who made them. Cartwright stumbled backward as the riders closed in, his voice breaking. "No, I built this town." He fired wildly, bullets passing through shadows that refused to die. The riders circled, flames igniting where their hooves struck. James McGraw stood tall, his revolver lowered, watching judgment unfold. Cartwright fell to his knees, begging, "I gave you everything." The riders struck, engulfing him in spectral fire, his scream echoing across the plains. Mary Collins turned her son's face away as Cartwright's empire of lies crumbled. Dust Heaven shook, but for the first time, the curse turned toward its true master. Silence returned as the riders vanished into mist, their vengeance complete. Dust Heaven smoldered, ruins glowing under a pale dawn. James McGraw stood in the ashes, his revolver heavy at his side. Mary Collins approached, her child clinging to her skirt, eyes wet but steady. "It's over," she whispered. James shook his head, voice low. "The land don't forgive. It only remembers." Thomas Reed dropped his rifle, shoulders slumping, haunted by what remained. The church bell tolled once, its lonely sound carrying across the plains. James turned toward the horizon, his silhouette carved in rising light, a hero forged in ruin.